Waiting for our live stream to kick in. You're not on camera, so. You should be good to go. Okay, so good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is a community forum that we're having on our 3-year strategic plan. I'm Matt Evans. I'm the superintendent of the Monticello Central School District. Also joining me tonight is Dr. Linda Oehler-Marx, the assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction. And this is an overview of the strategic plan that we developed as a district and ultimately the Board of Education approved this past summer. The impetus behind the strategic plan is to really develop a plan that operationalizes the district to try to fulfill the Board of Education's mission and vision for the district. So several years ago, I believe, maybe 4 years ago now, I think in 2018 perhaps, the Board of Education developed or revised its mission, vision, and ultimately its goals. The mission of the Board of Education is to ensure that each learner is future ready by providing empowering educational experiences. And the vision of the board is to build a world-class community of schools and be a district of choice. So every strategic planning committee meeting that we had, we began with this mission and vision statement just to kind of ground everyone and to remind them what we were seeking in this strategic plan. Also several years ago, in addition to the mission and vision that the board established, the Board of Education established 4 key goals around the areas of student success, school climate, school culture, community engagement, and fiscal responsibility. And these are the goals that went with each one. So, student success, the board will provide a holistic education comprised of extensive curricular and extracurricular experiences that empower each individual student to conquer challenges, develop talents, and discover passions while sustaining rigor and achieving evidence-based academic growth. And there's 3 other goals that go along with that one. And the strategic plan addresses each one of these goals and identifies performance indicators, in other words, targets of how we as a district and ultimately the Board of Education can assess its progress towards achieving these goals, and also strategies used to fulfill them. So the committee's objective was to create a 3-year plan to detail the strategies used to fulfill those goals. So first to identify kind of performance indicators and then strategies to achieve them. The purpose of the plan, again, detail those strategies to be used. And more importantly, and this speaks to the style and the formatting of the plan, to have an easy reference for stakeholders in working towards the goals established by the Board of Education. Those of you in attendance tonight have a copy of the plan. One of the reasons for that is because we were it was important to us to have a plan that was relatively brief, that was not binders full of different statements, data, appendices, if then flow charts and what have you, but rather a simplified, here's the board goal, here are the indicators that are going to tell us whether or not we've achieved that goal by 2025, and here are kind of the strategies in each of the 3 years to get us there. So we wanted something that was simple and plain, and something that, if we needed to print off multiple copies for people, we could do that relatively easily. And also people could go to our website and download it without, downloading a 150-page PDF file, for example. A little bit about the process. We convened the strategic planning back in the winter. It had its first meeting. I think we were initially scheduled for January, but sometimes scheduling things in the evening and winter time. I know some of you have kids who participate in winter athletics. You know what that can be like. So our first meeting was in February of 2022. We met monthly, or say almost monthly. There was an interruption in May, with the final meeting being in June. This is a picture of some of the people who were on that committee in attendance tonight. Dr. Oehler-Marx was on that committee, obviously. Courtney Bonfante was on that committee, and Jennifer Holmes, Board of Education member. Thank you all for your time on that committee. So we had a large committee, and then we split up that committee into work groups. So we had 4 different work groups. Each work group was tasked with one of the board goal areas, whether that be school culture, student success, community engagement, or fiscal responsibility. And those work groups met several times in between the regular monthly committee meetings, and then we came back as a larger committee. That committee consisted of stakeholders from almost every area of the district, Board of Education members, administrators, staff members, parents. We even had high school students on this committee as well. And some of these committee members attended every meeting, some attended only a few, but we thank everyone. And we kept every committee member obviously apprised of the process throughout. So I thank everyone for their time as we developed that plan. So if you're viewing this on a live stream, you can certainly obviously look at the page that's in front of you, but those of you here in attendance, if you have a copy of the plan, just to kind of center you on what you should be looking at on each of these pages is when you go to a particular page, and what I have up here is student success. In the top left corner is the goal statement. That's the same goal statement I read before for student success. We have the puzzle piece, student success. To the right of the puzzle piece, we have the board vision, again, world-class community of schools and be a district of choice. And then immediately underneath that, I've highlighted what does success look like. So these are the 3-year targets that we are striving for. So in other words, what was tasked to the committee is in 2025, what would the indicators be to tell us that we've achieved this goal? These indicators really are, I'll say, relatively fixed. This is what we're going to continue to strive for by 2025 to hopefully attain. What aren't so fixed are the actions and tasks in each year, some of the resources and tactics, and then the annual progress updates. So these were put forward by the committee. The committee developed these, the work groups within each target area. They were brought back to the whole committee, and then the committee ultimately revised and tweaked these. So the actions and tasks represent our best thinking in winter and spring of 2022 as we set about moving forward with this plan. So while we hope to do these actions and tasks and strategies, we also have to be mindful of everyone's resources, and we also have to be flexible enough to say, well, maybe we're not going to do this year, maybe we're not going to do this at all, maybe we're going to try something else to hopefully fulfill this goal, right? So that's generally the format of each of these goal pages. Any questions on format or what I've gone through thus far? Right, so let's talk about the success indicators in general. You certainly have them in front of you. I'm not going to run through every single success indicator that's in the plan, but just generally speaking, we are seeking to improve outcomes by reducing rates of suspension and also developing individualized student success plans. We are seeking to enhance the perceptions of the district. One of the things that we kind of wrestled with was, all right, so if we were to become a district of choice and a world-class community of schools, how would we know that we've reached that? What would that look like? And, there's all sorts of data that we might use, but ultimately, I think what we centered around were perceptions that stakeholders held about our district and about our schools. So we're seeking to do surveys on the school environment. We're seeking surveys on student and teacher self-efficacy. How effective and how much voice and choice do I have in this school, in my classroom to make a difference and to be heard? Community collaboration, and ultimately lifelong learning opportunities. What is it that the district provides the community so that the adults in the community can better their opportunities, have enhanced learning opportunities for them. We are seeking parity across suspension rates and activity participation. In other words, if we have an overall student demographic who attend our schools? Do we see that demographic represented in our suspension rates, in our activity participation rates? So that's not to say that, all right, so on our wrestling team, do we have the same, student enrollment demographic on our wrestling team, but rather in all of our interscholastic athletics? If we took all of those athletes on the whole, does that reflect our larger student population? Or do we have more girls participating in athletics than boys? Do we have more non-economically disadvantaged students participating than those students who are economically disadvantaged? So, and then where those disparities exist, what do we need to do differently to have something that is representative of our larger student population? And ultimately looking to continue our fiscal and financial stability. So you do see goals in there about our fiscal responsibility. That is to ultimately bring the undesignated fund balance down to what the state recommends as an undesignated fund balance, which is 4% of the overall budget. I think right now we're around 8 or 9%, if I recall the audit that was done recently. And then also around state aid. You may be aware that the state has, and we are 2 weeks away from an election. So those of you who want to contact people running for office, the state has committed to fully funding school districts in foundation aid by the end of 2024, which for our district next year, in 23-24, should be a 13% increase in state aid. So there's a question for candidates out there that, if you want to know their position on things, it's a question for them. What we've written into this plan is that our state aid would account for a minimum of at least half of the overall budget. That's where we are this current year. We think that is a reasonable expectation of our, our elected officials, as well as the tax levy. So if half of it is state aid, then the other half of it would be generated from the tax levy. So trying to keep that type of balance where right now, unless there's something that changes, that's what we think is a reasonable expectation of our budget. Now, the other thing, and I'm not going to go through the top part of the document, this is more of just an image, but we are integrating the strategic plan in our school level improvement plans, and also my improvement plan, or the superintendent's goals and strategies, as well as the district comprehensive improvement plan. So we are seeking to have alignment with our school level plans, district plan, and my goals as a superintendent. And we're going to take a moment now before I turn this over to Dr. Oehler-Marx, just to do a bit of a deep dive on school culture. So, for example, if we're to look at our school culture targets by 2025, so again, this is a 3-year target, we hope that 90% of our students and 80% or more of our stakeholder groups believe that their school exhibits a safe, secure, and orderly environment where stakeholders feel a sense of kindness, respect, inclusivity, and belonging, as indicated by survey results, and that by 2025, again, a 3-year target, not a first-year target, but by the end of 3 years, that our suspension rates have been halved compared to their current rate in 2022, and also be reflective of student enrollment demographics, that there's parity in terms of our student suspension rates. So some of the things that you'll see in the strategies to address that, obviously we'll be assessing students, parents, and staff annually to assess their feelings of value, respect, safety, and support. It will be an anonymous survey with questions constructed with support and input from the strategic planning teams. Just to give everyone an update, Dr. Oehler-Marx and I met with a potential vendor, was it earlier last week, on constructing, what a survey might look like and how we can survey all of our stakeholders, parents, students, and staff members. So we have that ball rolling. We'll be coming back to the Board of Education and our school level teams on future development for those surveys as well. We're also planning random quarterly walkthroughs by administration to ensure cleanliness of facilities. We've begun the development of that process as well. And in this, district administration, school administrators, and the facilities department leadership would have quarterly walkthroughs of a particular school with, kind of a walkthrough instrument to talk about, all right, what is the cleanliness and how up to date are our facilities? And then how do we prioritize those areas? In other words, what are things that, should be done on a nightly basis? What's part of the regular maintenance and cleaning routine that might not be getting done? What is something that might be a short-term maintenance project? In other words, is it something that can be done by our maintenance staff internally? Can that be done within the next month, within the next 3 months, within the school year? Or is that something that really should be tackled by an outside vendor or on the next capital project? So really having that quarterly dialogue between school leadership, district leadership, and facilities leadership about, all right, we know this needs to be done, but we just can't throw everything at facilities and say, get this done and this done and this done and this done. And then they are left to scramble to prioritize on their own and prioritize in a vacuum. So it's really creating that open dialogue to say, all right, we recognize these as areas. What's the best approach to getting these done in a responsible way? And then lastly, and I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Oehler-Marx in a minute, using data gathered from panorama surveys to identify and target students' social emotional needs. We are continuing with the panorama surveys this year. We believe that they gave us some good actionable data from last year. Dr. Oehler-Marx will walk you through what some of those indicators look like and how to access the parent opt-in form to do that. So very briefly, just how to access the plan for those of you at home and those of you in attendance. Same route, if you go to our website and you click on the About Us tab on our website, you'll see the strategic plan linked as an About Us link on the right-hand side, or I've condensed it into this, what is called micro URLs, tiny URLs, bit.lys, if you will. That's a bit.ly micro link that will get you straight to a PDF. Any questions before I turn this over to Dr. Oehler-Marx and anything I've just shared? There'll be more time later. Okay. Dr. Oehler-Marx.
Great, thank you, Dr. Evans. So I'm going to talk a little bit about social emotional learning and how we measure our progress. And as Dr. Evans mentioned, we use the panorama survey as one of our instruments. So before I start talking about that, I just want to make sure that we understand, right, the conditions for learning. So one thing that we like to say in education is that Margot has to happen before Bloom. So when we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, these are the bars on the bottom, right? So we think about the fact that students need to have their physiological needs met, right? So like clothing, food, shelter. They have to feel safe. They have to feel like they belong. And then when we move up to esteem and self-actualization, that's where we can get into more cognitive development, right? So Bloom's is where we have the cognition, but we have to have Maslow first. And so one of the things that we have been in place for years within the district at the elementary level is the ruler program. And this is something that we have expanded into the middle school and the high school over the past year or so. And ruler is a program out of Yale. It's a framework, not a curriculum. We have a number of individuals within the district that work to develop curriculum to be responsive to the students who are in front of us. So as opposed to like a canned program, this is okay for all students. We're trying to meet the needs of the students who are in front of us. And ruler stands for R is recognizing emotions in self and others. U is understanding the causes and consequences of emotions. L, labeling emotions accurately. E, expressing emotions appropriately. And R, regulating emotions effectively. And we know that all of these elements are necessary in order for students to learn. We call these academic readiness indicators, right? And without these skills to be able to master as students move throughout the grades, they are challenged in attending to their learning. So social emotional learning, just as a brief review of that, and there's a link to CASEL's updated 2020 definition of SEL, social emotional learning. It's integral, right? So like we've been doing this for years, any of us that have been teachers for decades, this is something that we have always integrated into our classrooms. Kids are not widgets, right? So they come to the classroom and they have all kinds of needs, right? And we have to support them. And we also understand the notion of Maslow before Bloom, right? And so that we want our kids to feel safe. We want to make sure that all of their needs are met. And then we also need to make sure that they can regulate their emotions, right? Because the best learning pushes kids to expand beyond what they know or what they think they know and that they can do. And that causes frustration, right? And so emotional regulation is necessary in order for students to overcome frustration and be able to advance in their thinking and their learning. So I teach SEL explicitly. So we understand, right, through quite a few decades of research that explicitly teaching the skills of emotional regulation, of the ability to interact with your peers and your teachers in a responsible, appropriate way, that leads to better academic performance, an improved attitude and behavior towards school. There are fewer negative behaviors that are associated in school, and there's just reduced emotional distress overall. And we use Ruler. Another reason that we use Ruler is that it's connected to New York State's social emotional learning goals, and they are really organized around 3 buckets, which you can see as related to the Ruler framework: to develop self-awareness and self-management skills, to use social awareness and interpersonal skills to establish and maintain positive relationships, and to demonstrate ethical decision-making skills and responsible behaviors. And so all that we do is integrated together. So we have the social emotional learning goals from New York State that is integrated into the program that we use as a framework for our social emotional learning. And then, like any school district, we need to assess both our individual student progress towards those goals, as well as our own program and how effective is our program and what changes do we need to make depending on what those results are. So that leads us to Panorama. So this is a survey that we gave last year to our students, and the idea is to look at those buckets on the social emotional learning bench goals from New York State and say, how are our kids doing? How are our kids able to create relationships and with their peers and with their teachers? How do they feel about those relationships? Do they have self-regulatory strategies for their emotions? Do they have time management skills? All of those things we want to know, both on the building level and the district level, so we can make decisions about the resources that we have and what resources we'll need to go where to support teachers and students to improve in those areas. Then also on the classroom level, so at the elementary school level or in the middle school and teams, to be able to look at particular areas where we see we need to do more support. So teachers are cognizant of what kinds of supports they would need to offer their students. And then on the individual level, right? So that we can look at individual students and say, all right, this is how I see myself, right? As not being able to maybe manage my anger when I get frustrated. And so I'm going to work with that individual student to see how I can help that student feel frustration in learning, right? We call that productive struggle, so that they're able to continue their learning, and then to look at their growth over the course of the year. So by the end of the year, they can look at how they think about themselves and see how they get grown at that point. And so that's why we give Panorama. And so just to know that this is the questions that are embedded within Panorama are aligned to the competencies in the New York State social emotional learning benchmarks. And the questions themselves were piloted on a very large scale. And there are a lot of reliability, validity testing, and continuing refinement of those questions. We don't make up the questions on the survey. That's why we have purchased this tool. And more than 3 million students use this survey nationally, which also gives us another way of assessing the effectiveness of our program by looking at how do our results stack up to other schools around the country. So these are the survey topics that are available in Panorama, right? And you can see the natural alignment to the social emotional learning benchmarks and to the Ruler program around those academic readiness indicators. So the survey topics are around supportive relationships, social awareness, self-management, and emotion regulation. What you see underneath are some sample questions that building teams can pick from in developing their survey tool. So the questions that are most important to those building leadership teams in thinking about the program that they offer in the school.
So yeah,
Sure. So these are example questions. These are not the questions that we selected. I'll read those on the next slide. But some of the questions that you might see in these survey topics are, do you have a teacher or other adult from school who you can count on to help you no matter what? That's in supportive relationships. In social awareness, when others disagreed with you, how respectful were you of their views? Self-management, how often did you get your work done right away instead of waiting until the last minute? And in emotion regulation, how often are you able to pull yourself out of bed? So you can see how the answers to those questions, right, are important to a teacher in order to help support students to get those Maslow areas supported first, right, before they can move on to greater cognitive development. So these are some sample questions that we had in our surveys last year. So K2, we don't ask our K2 students to take this assessment. Rather, teachers have perceptions of students, right? And so they're the ones that are doing the filling out of the survey. And so one of the questions on the K2 teacher perception survey last year was, overall, how focused is the student in the class? On 3.5, this is when students start taking this assessment themselves. When things go wrong for you, how calm are you able to stay? During the past 30 days, when others disagreed with you, how respectful were you of their views? And in 6.12, we use that question, how often are you able to pull yourself out of a bad mood? And how often, in the last 30 days, how often did you come to class prepared? Right, so looking at the answers of those questions, principals and building leadership teams can make better decisions about the supports that they want to offer to both their students and to their staffs to begin to address that. That is what I have on that section.
Thank you, Dr. Oehler-Marx. And I guess now would be the opportune time for any questions those of you attending tonight you may have about this presentation or the plan.
Dr. Evans, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that last year we did an opt-out strategy, and this year we're doing an opt-in strategy. So there will be information going home on Parent Square from the building leaders to parents in that building, and then they would have the opportunity to opt their children into the survey at that time.
Thank you. That's the panorama survey.
Yes.
Yes, Ms. Holmes.
So when would we expect notification about the survey?
It should be in the next few weeks.
Okay.
It's Ashley Riley. I just wanted to make it clear that information I would say it's on our website, on the website, and it's dated October 11th. So if you look at October 11th, that's when you'll see all the information on Henry. And
I want to repeat that in case they did. So if anyone viewing this is looking for more information on the survey, if you go to our website, we did put up a news item on October 11th, just a couple
you
weeks
go
ago.
to the top navigation, there's a button. If you hit that, it shows.
Okay. So if if you click the news icon, you'll see that. I'm sorry, Ms. Riley.
And then okay, I'll just say, I have just a quick question. I tried to get into something board meeting. I don't think I was very eloquent in my acting, so I'm going to try again. If you do not opt in your child in kindergarten through second grade, then that's the way their teacher can take the survey in their regard because they themselves are not taking it.
We believe yes, and we've looked into the sense you raised that question.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because the way that the policy is worded is that an individual is not compelled to answer survey questions about their own, I think it's behavioral issues or psychological issues. But as educators, we do make those assessments, certainly in the special education world. There's educators who assess students based on that information. And even outside that, teachers do kind of make those judgments. So we believe as we sit today, the answer is yes, teachers will be doing that in every student, but we will certainly revisit it. Just K through 2, yes, because students aren't answering the questions.
And to be clear, K-2 questions will be available for parents. They will be aware of what how teachers are doing it.
But if a parent didn't want it at all, they would submit some kind of form outside of what's available in the school.
If a parent objected to that, we recommend that they contact the school principal for discussion. Okay.
Thank you. My other comment, when it talks about panorama being used by 3 million students, I would say that that's probably to do with the best Attorney General Merrick Garland, his family co-founded panorama. So that's pretty important, just to say. And then finally, I just wanted to ask about, we talk about 50% of the suspension rate being out of the next 3 years. Does that mean out of school or out of school and in school?
That's just out of school.
Just out of school.
Just out of, yes.
Okay.
Looking at strategies that obviously would minimize those behaviors, right? That's
Sure.
kind of step one. And then step two, looking at more in-house and restorative practices that we can do internally to keep the student in school, because we know that if we've learned nothing else from the pandemic, it's the value of in-person instruction. Even if the student is in an in-school suspension room or an alternative placement within the school system, that is still much better for them. And there's a lot of research out there that supports that too, than being home and being suspended. There is a time, there is a time and a place for out of school suspension. But what we're looking at is, trying to end the recidivism and the other behavior, behaviors that might lead a student to being suspended outside of school.
Sure. And I recall back to 65 months ago, there was passage of professional development hours as required for the next couple of years to talk about a lot of this implementation thing. So for teachers, it was something like 40 to 50 hours of the next couple of years, like that. It's required training to understand how to implement the restorative justice practice to eliminate some of the suspensions.
Yes, yep. And we also, this year, we have a group that's working with teachers and our administrators in our schools on a regular basis to enhance their understanding and practice of restorative practices.
How do we know if our school suspension rates were too high? Let's just say last year, where suspension rates were without high school. How do we know this too high? We compare it to other schools. We're comparing it to, say, with what schools does the state have a certain kind of range, or is it that there's experts that suggest a certain amount percentage or size of the school? And then how do you account for the same student that might be a repeat?
Sure. So actually, the state does monitor that. I think the last time that the district has been cited for disproportionality and suspension rates in the past. And then the state does ask for a plan, right, for how you're going to address that. So that is something that the state does monitor, but it is also something that we look at similar schools, not just within ourselves, but then we also look at trend lines, right? And so if you look pre-pandemic, right, you could see that suspension rates in the high school were decreasing, right? And so we have obviously seen an increase from last year, right? And so like looking at that, what are we doing to address that so that we can get back on our downward trajectory that we had in the past, right? And when you look at students that are repeat offenders, right, that the first thing that jumps out, right, is that the interventions that we have in place, including out of school suspension, have not yet been effective for that student, right? Because they're continually behaving inappropriately in a manner that forces another out of school suspension, right? And so it's like trying to unlock the puzzle of what is going to work for that student, right? And so when you think about restorative practices embedded within a discipline system, it's about thinking about the multiple interventions that are possible with students to find the right one that works for this.
So then it's our rates of last year, is it is it the point where it's at a level where we need to cut half of them in 3 years? Just trying to understand like where the more than 50% trauma 3 years came from. Is that something that where did the 50% number?
Well, the strategic planning committee,
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
determined that.
How many children why we switched from an opt-out to the harder to reach out to that many people to get that opt-in, you might get less results.
So we were made aware of a policy that said more or less that students cannot be required to answer questions regarding any potential psychological issues or problems that they may have. And that's rooted in federal law. And the idea behind it initially was that schools can't be compelling kids to say, all right, tell me any psychological issue that you've been diagnosed with. But when we looked at some of the questions in the survey and we lined it up with the policy, we felt that it was, really kind of too close to for us to have the authority to compel students to answer the question, and that the policy would therefore be in effect, which is that parents have to give consent to questions like that. Okay.
So you would have to opt in. You can't just do the opt out. I just feel like you just get a lot more people that do it.
Oh, we do too. Yeah. Well, that's.
I don't know if it's crossing the line. I don't know.
It was too. Let's say it was too.
Obviously, let's do answer this question. Not answer that question, regardless of the status of opt in or opt out.
Sure.
If somebody feels uncomfortable at that moment. So anytime you have to opt in instead of opt out, your results are just so much lower. And unfortunate when you're trying to measure such a large scale project result.
Yeah, and for us, it was just, you mentioned the line crossing. It was like too close to the line on either side of it. And that's one of the reasons why we've put it up on our website, why we're sharing it in our presentation tonight, is to say, look, here's what these look like. Here's why we're doing it. And here's, how a parent would opt into that, or guardian or caregiver. And we're also going to put something out on Parent Square to inform parents and caregivers of it. Yeah, we're recognizing that as well. Ms. LaRusso.
Survey for like school safety, food, physical activity. Have you any thought about?
Yeah, so that would be in kind of the school culture surveys I referenced before, in working with that vendor. I've had experience with this particular vendor before, and there are questions around kind of the school environment, food offerings. I don't know about physical activity per se, but they can customize it. And what we intend on doing is, once we kind of settle on a vendor who would administer the survey and design it, they would come out and meet with our kind of school level teams to say, what items do you think are important for achieving the school's goals? And hearing from them. And then they have banks of survey items that they can plug in and say, how about this one, or maybe this one? But yeah, that would be, and those surveys are anonymous. So those aren't linked to, that policy doesn't take effect on the school culture policies or the school culture surveys. Those are anonymous. So we would send that out to, all staff members, and we would have an idea of X number of staff members district-wide responded to the survey, X number of parents district-wide responded to the survey, and then we would break that down by school as well. So there may be issues that are particular to particular schools from students or parents and community members or staff. But those are all anonymous.
One more question.
Sure.
In the school culture, I guess it kind of crosses over into student success. I don't see anything in here maybe about reverse.
About the what?
Yeah, there's nothing here about like food or anything, but there's nothing here. We talk about being diverse, making sure that I don't see where it's being culturally diverse as well.
So this plan is not to replace kind of all of the policies, handbooks, goals, the district comprehensive improvement plan, the school level plans. It's rather to speak to how do we think we're going to reach these board goals that were established several years ago. So to your point about food being, kind of diverse and representative of the communities we serve, there are, the district has a belonging, equity, diversity, and representation policy that touches upon that. And that is something that we do work with our food service to say, look, X% of the students are taking lunch today. What does your menu look like? And is your menu kind of attractive to, diverse groups of students so that they see their food and culture represented in the menu? So those discussions do happen on different levels. The plans shouldn't be seen as like exclusive, like this is all we're doing in the next 3 years, but rather these are the things that we're doing to target the board goals as they're currently understood. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, any other thing you'd like to add?
Nope.
All right. So this concludes our presentation for tonight, and we had planned only on 2 of these forums, and both of them are, they were live streamed and they are posted on our district YouTube channel. So anyone who wants to find out more information can go to our YouTube channel and watch one of these presentations. They can certainly also contact either their school administration, Dr. Oehler-Marx, or me. You can find our information on our website. Thank you everyone for coming out. Thank you for joining us at home. Stay well with Monty Pride. Have a good evening, everyone.